Good morning everyone and welcome to today's Surface and Adobe training webinar. It's great to have you join us and be part of the Surface Authorised Reseller community. Please note today I'll be recording the webinar to share with those people that haven't been able to make the call today. So today we have a special guest with us who is only in Australia for a couple of days, and we've managed to snafu him for a webinar so that he can share his insights. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
When it comes to our Surface Authorised Resellers, for us as the team at Microsoft, our priority is about helping them to drive their Surface business. That's what we're here for. So we're taking this opportunity, Michael, while you're in town to demonstrate how Surface and Adobe can work beautifully together, and so that our partners can go on and demonstrate that to their customers. So Michael, I'll pass over to you, and I encourage anyone to ask any questions in the IM window and we'll try to respond during the call. If not, we'll follow up later. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here in Australia. This is my first time in Australia. What I'm going to really cover with you today is tell you a little bit who I am, talk to you a little bit about how Microsoft is working with Adobe and how you can help sell Surface devices to Adobe customers and Adobe Creative Cloud users, and then go take you through a few little demos of what we can do with some of the Adobe Creative Cloud applications today. Please feel free to type any questions into the chat window, and we'll try to keep this as a more of a dialogue rather than just me talking at a blank screen. So just to give you an idea of who I am, I was actually educated as an architect. That's where I learned how to draw. That's where I learned real love for drawing with a pen. So it's very excited to be working for Microsoft, who has invested heavily in devices like the Surface and technologies like inking. But I've spent my career over the past 20-some years in software development. I have been working for Microsoft for the past 9 years, and what I do and what I love is I love the whole world of creative design tools that help people, whether they are children, whether they are the professionals, whether they're students, to help them be creative. And I think that the technology that we have in front of us with the Surface and with the pen on the Surface, I think that we have some real opportunities to have a creative tool set that appeals to all different types of users in Australia. My day job is I work with partners. I'm part of what Microsoft calls our developer experience team. And what this team is responsible for is helping some of the top partners in the world build applications and build experiences on our technology. And for me, that includes Adobe, that includes Sony, Hulu. You don't get Hulu today here in Australia, but they're sort of like Netflix. I also work with Time Warner. That's everything from HBO to Warner Brothers and all the different parts of Time Warner and Turner and things like that. And then I also work with Fox. And I help them all build apps on Windows, build apps on Xbox, build apps on Azure, using HoloLens, the Surface Hub, all the different types of developer technologies, including Office, and anything you can think of that a developer might use to build an experience in Windows and on Microsoft technology. And of course, I'm not from Australia, as you can tell by my accent. I do live in California, and so California isn't where Microsoft is headquarters. We're headquartered in Redmond, as you probably know. I live in California and actually work out of my home. To give you an idea of what my workspace looks like, and where I work out of my home, and in my home I have a Surface Pro 3, and on that Pro 3 I've connected using the Surface the dock with an additional wireless mouse and keyboard, 2 additional monitors, they're both Dell monitors, and then also in my office I have a number of other devices. Those include some 3D printers, actually 6 3D printers, HP Sprout device, regular printer, And the reason I have all these 3D printers is I'm actually also working with 3D printing companies to help them write drivers for Windows, so that when you plug a 3D printer into Windows, including a Surface, of course, that you can actually print directly from any application that supports 3D printing to those printers. So you maybe start getting the hint that I am a creative. So I am also I believe that I am creative. When I first came to Sydney at the beginning of the week, I did a few sketches. Those sketches I did them in a journal, and I also did them on my Surface. I've been ever since I studied architecture, I've been fascinated by the architecture of Jornudsen, and I've always wanted to come see Sydney, and of course the Sydney Opera House. And so I forced myself to my go-to design tool is a leather-bound journal with nice thick paper, and I did watercolors on that. So on the left, on the bottom, there's a watercolor of the Sydney Opera House, and on the right, on the bottom, there is a drawing that I did with an app called Plumbago, which is a free app developed by Microsoft Research in the Store. In addition to doing these drawing and artistic, I also build apps. So I have a couple of apps, probably about 8 different apps in the store that you can download today on Windows. They include one that generates called Topography, and it generates 3-dimensional topographic maps from anywhere in the world based upon data that's coming from the Bing Maps service, and then you can then send these directly to a 3D printer. And then also I've done work lately a lot around 3D printing to make it possible to take sites that or take experiences that let you design 3-dimensional objects and send them directly to a printer, 3D printer on them. I've also done a lot of work around animation. If you want to see what I've done recently here in Sydney, I put up on Adobe has a portfolio site called Behance, and if you go to behance.net/synergist, you'll see a portfolio, and on that portfolio I have a number of my sketches that I did in Sydney. And just to give you an idea, what I really forced myself to do is, in addition to doing my sketching in a journal, I really forced myself to try sketching. Well, actually, it wasn't really a forcing; it was actually a lot of fun to start sketching on the Surface. And so what you start noticing here is that the ability to have pressure sensitivity in a pen can give you some real natural looking and beautiful strokes that can go into a drawing. Of course, this is the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Another view of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. These drawings took me about from 5 to 10 minutes. A really quick sketch of the Sydney Opera House. This is a view of the skyline from Circular Quay. And then another one. These sketches that I've shown you so far I've done with this app called Plumbago. It's a free app in the store. And then I started doing some drawings with Photoshop. And these ones with the beige background are all using Photoshop. And as you can see here, it is an incredibly expressive medium. This is all done on the Surface, on site, right in front of the St. Mary's Cathedral or the Opera House, or and I sit down and do a drawing. And here I didn't use, as you can probably tell, I did not use all of the functionality that it could be in Photoshop, but I sort of limited it to what I wanted to do to be able to do a quick sketch. So basically 3 colors in the background and quick sketching with a variable with pen that the width is defined by the thickness is defined by the pressure you put onto it. So what I have learned from work and what I do with Adobe is I help them build apps, and I help them make their apps work better on Windows 10 and make their apps work better on Surface. So a lot of different things I would do, and especially around the Creative Cloud, is help them understand what functionality that they can use in our newer versions of Windows and Windows 10 that they can take advantage of. And a lot of this work that we've done with them around Photoshop and Illustrator specifically have been around inking. And what we see, and the reason that Microsoft has really invested a lot in inking and pens, is that we see this as a real the key tool for creative expression and ideation. What Adobe has shared with us is that 50% of their Creative Cloud subscribers are on Windows. And if you understand how people purchase applications like Photoshop and Illustrator and use them today, they typically are not purchasing a box piece of software from a retailer. They are typically getting a subscription, and they have a number of different bundles for those subscriptions, and those subscriptions called Creative Cloud, and they have the access. If you understand what Office 365 is from Microsoft, this is a very similar model. You basically pay for access to all the latest and greatest versions of their software, depending on the subscription you get, and they will be updated 4 or 5 times a year. One major update, a few minor updates, but you are always current with the Creative Cloud. And as long as you keep your Creative Cloud subscription, you have access to all of the resources you put in the Creative Cloud on your Creative Cloud site, and also as well as all the tools and applications in the Creative Cloud. So the areas of investment that we have really done with Adobe have really been around pen and touch, and some of the work that I've done with them specifically has been around enabling Windows 10 3D printing within Photoshop, but also understanding how the applications can work better in high DPI screens like the Surface, and how they can work better with inking on the Surface and other OEM devices. The real value proposition we sort of have 2 ways of looking at for a creative professional for the Surface. One of them is we see this quite often at shows or at conferences, where somebody will come up and we'll be demonstrating Surfaces, and we'll have people come to us and show them what beautiful things that they've done on their iPad Pro, and they'll show how they've used the new pencil on iPad and how they've created some beautiful assets. Now, these are great. I think it's great that people are using a pen and they're using it in a digital way. But typically, most of these people will have a backpack on. In that backpack, I make an assumption, and I'm typically correct, that they have a MacBook Pro in there. And what the assumption is, and this is typically spot on, is that the iPad has not replaced their laptop, their MacBook Pro, and they still have to have 2 devices because they can't get through the whole day and be a totally productive person with only their iPad. And the iPad will give them a really nice long battery life, but it won't let them do the things that they need to do at some point during the day, whether that is sit down and actually get a document out, or make something or review something in Illustrator or Photoshop. And really the value proposition here is that one device, that Surface, can replace the combination of both that iPad Pro and the MacBook Pro in a single device. The other proposition is for that creative professional who already has a device called a Wacom Cintiq, which is really the aspirational device. It's a expensive, very powerful combination screen and digitizing tablet that you hook up directly to your computer, whether that computer is a MacBook Pro or whether that computer is an iMac, or that computer is a PC or even a Surface, or any PC actually. And these are users who spend, whether they're doing photo retouching, whether they're doing 3D modeling, they're spending all of their day, 8 hours a day, in these applications, and their desktop is set up so that they can draw. And they have realized that drawing and inking is a really important part of the way that they are creative. And for these users, the really interesting proposition for the Creative Cloud is that with a Creative Cloud subscription, that they can have up to 2 different devices with that Creative Cloud the Creative Cloud apps on that. So really, the proposition here is if they have a Wacom Cintiq, they probably have that sitting basically fixed on their desktop at home or their desktop at their office, their place of work. It doesn't go portable with them. And if you are a creative person, you don't limit your creativity and the times that you need to draw to the times that you're in the office or the times that you are sitting at your desk. And the real value proposition is adding. You have adopted inking. You have adopted pens. You think that pens are an aspect of your important aspect of your creativity. And here's a way to make it possible for you to use pens in more places, in more situations, and in more postures. just to give an understanding, the difference between this, the Wacom pens and the pens that are on the Surface Pro 3 and Surface Pro 4s is that on the Surface Pro 4, they both the Wacom and Surface pens have the same levels of pressure sensitivity, 1024 levels of pressure sensitivity, but the Wacom devices also support things like angle, so the angle of the pen that is touching the screen, and also the barrel roll, how the pen is turning. And for some users, that's really important if you're doing calligraphy of some sorts, or if you really are using that aspect of the functionality. That's really important. For most users, it is a nice thing, but it is not a must-have. So they will probably notice there is a difference there, but the ability just to have the pressure sensitivity and the fluidity, and also being able to show off the different types of pen nibs that are now available in the Surface Surface Pro 4 pen and the Surface Book pen is a real thing that you need to really show. And the key here is, since that pen is the key tool of creative expression, the earlier that you can get somebody to start drawing on a Surface or a Surface Book, the better. Really, you want to get them drawing. And for the first group of people, they probably don't draw enough and they want to draw more. And the second group who already are doing drawing, they want to draw in more places. And they want to draw in more places that are that really, in this case, when you are drawing it on multiple devices, your iPad and your MacBook Pro and the Wacom Cintiq, you're drawing it on these multiple places, that synchronization actually becomes an issue. You do a drawing on your tablet, and the only way to get from the tablet, whether that tablet's an iPad, to your PC or to your Mac, is through the Creative Cloud or through some other cloud delivery mechanism. Even though they may be sitting right next to each other, they have to go through the cloud to get them. So if you aren't connected to the internet, you may not be able to synchronize between a device like an iPad and a computer. So the main thing to emphasize here of the value of the Creative Cloud suite from Adobe and Surface is really the ability to have that pen, and that pen to work in the various postures that the creative works throughout the day. So I'm going to pause right here and ask if there's any questions on these points that I've hit on. Please type them in the window, or even unmute yourself and please ask. Okay, so don't see any questions yet. So I will go on to, and please, if you have any ideas or questions, please just put them into the chat window. So first, I'm going to give you a little demonstration of something simple that you can demonstrate with Adobe Photoshop and Surface. So Photoshop is one of the applications that's in the Creative Cloud. And depending on a person's Creative Cloud subscription, they may have one or more of the Creative Cloud apps. I have a sort of considered a full Creative Cloud subscription, so I have access to all of the different applications, and I can choose which application I install. I've installed 3 right now: Photoshop, Illustrator, and Muse, which is a 3-dimensional character posing application. I'm going to demonstrate Photoshop and Illustrator to you because these are the 2 most popular Creative Cloud applications. Oop, I picked the wrong one. Photoshop will be starting up in a moment. Let's close up Muse. Okay, so in Photoshop, Photoshop is the 20-some-year-old iconic photo editing, imagery touching application. It's used in a number of different industries today. And if we look at the drawings that I showed earlier on of the Sydney Opera House, I'm going to actually just show you what those actually look like, the Sydney Opera House and Harbor Bridge. And I'm going to sort of show you where, from somebody who draws all the time, where the real value comes in being able to doing drawing and doing inking on a surface on using Photoshop. So a couple of places to understand is the ways that they've implemented some gestures. And some of them are kind of obvious that I use two. You can't see these fingers on here, but I have two fingers, and I'm basically doing a pinched. I'm moving my fingers apart, and it's letting me zoom in to the. Did we just lose audio? No. So I just use two fingers to pinch in, and what I'm going to do is I have set up my drawing here with just a few of the features that I put onto the right. One of them is the layers, and if we look here on the layers, I'm just going to turn off a few of the layers to show you this is what I started off with, which was really just a blank page. And then I added a sort of a skeleton of what I was going to draw, and then I finished it up in a third layer after the background. So the idea that what you can do with Photoshop is really work within layers and work in a way that is much more flexible than actually working on a single sheet of paper or even an application, the application like OneNote, which is really a single layer application. And so what I can do is I can start zooming in on a certain part of the drawing, and I can then go in, and that's one thing you can do that you can't, of course, do on paper. And then I have other things I've selected, like the little brushes, and the brushes are different types of brushes that have different kind of expressive feels to them. And what I can start doing is start doing a little more detail and picking out different colors based on some swatches, and adding that detail directly in there. And then the other thing I can do is you can't see this, but I'm taking three fingers and putting them on the screen and then moving them from the right to the left. And what this is doing an undo. So undo and redo is putting three fingers on the screen and moving from the right to the left, or to redo from the left to the right. And with all of that, you have a drawing. So if I just wanted to show you, be able to do some drawing here. Another drawing, and then take my three fingers, move them from the right to the left. It erases these one by one and puts them back, moving from the left to the right. And this is, of course, something you can't do that easily with a pen and a paper. So the key here is to teach people, or to show people that they really can draw, they can be expressive, and they can be creative, and they can use a tool like a Surface to do more drawing or bring drawing to more places. And the conversation is we at Microsoft see the importance of drawing for a creative professional, of being able to have an outlet that has a direct line from the eye to the mind to the hand, and that is with a pen. That is not with a keyboard. That is not with a mouse. And if you're able to do that with a pen, you want to be able to draw more often, to be creative more often. Any questions on Photoshop? This is just a very small slice of what Photoshop can do. The next thing I'm going to show is Illustrator. Illustrator, as a Photoshop has traditionally been this, it's called a raster, or an image editing program, where you're actually modifying the actual dots that make up an image or a graphic. Whereas Illustrator is what's called a vector drawing program, which is all about. Did I just lose my audio? No, looks like we're good. Great. So with Illustrator, which is starting up right now, Illustrator is a vector drawing program, a vector graphics program, where I'm actually creating the geometry. So whereas if I zoom in on it, I'm never going to see those pixels or those dots as you zoom in on a screen. It's just all made up of the geometry. And the geometry is done with lines and curves and Bezier and splines and things like that. So everything is made up of geometry, not dots. So in Illustrator, we've worked with the Illustrator team to enable inking and enable gestures with pens in a really fun way. So if I were to create a new document in Illustrator, actually, let me just create a new document, new RGB document. What people typically see in Illustrator is this. I'm going to actually switch over to this. What people typically see in Illustrator is this: a huge number of little icons. It was kind of daunting. There's a lot to this interface, and they need to, each of these icons has multiple different options underneath them. Like the paintbrush tool has these different brushes. The line tool has all these different lines. You can do a ton of things in here, and it has these menus that have lots of different options in the menus. There are way too many options here for a person who just wants to do a drawing or just wants to start playing around with shapes. So what they've done here is if you go into tablet mode on your Surface, or like for example pulling off on the Surface Book, pulling it off of the keyboard, or putting the keyboard behind on the Surface, or removing the keyboard on the Surface Pro, it'll bring you into this touch workspace, which is what Adobe calls it. And here I'm going to use my two fingers again to pinch and zoom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this new tool on here called a shaper tool. And the shaper tool lets me draw shapes that then get fixed up. And what I can start doing here is I can say I want to remove this, and then I want to remove this, and I'm starting to make a shape that is a composite of these other shapes. So I can say, okay, well, I want to use my shaper tool some more. I want to say take here, and I want to remove this part, and then I remove this, and I remove this, and now I'm starting to make a shape that is all done with my pen and all done in a very fluid fashion. Now, I can also grab a brush, just like I was doing in Photoshop. Oh, pardon me. Let me grab this brush right here. And what you see with this brush is it has the width of it is defined by its by the pressure that I'm putting on it. So I had a little pressure at the beginning and a lot of pressure now. And what you see here is this is the expressiveness that you can have in Illustrator because they've done the work to make it work with a pressure-sensitive pen like the pen on the Surface. Of course, this will work in Illustrator with a Wacom tablet, with a Cintiq as well, and with a lot of other devices. But we made sure that they were able to make this work really well on with a Surface pen. So Microsoft in general, and this and Surface in particular, we are really bullish on inking, and inking is as a real important part of the experience, especially the experience for creative professionals, and even to the extent where I'm going to then, for example, be able to put some text in, and so the text, I'm going to say I want some text to go here, and I'm going to actually use my my handwriting input panel. So instead of putting up the keyboard, I'm going to use this handwriting input panel, and I can do a So if you look at this, my writing was a mixture of uppercase and lowercase because I studied architecture and I like to do some things in uppercase. And what you notice here is that the text that came out and was put in there was corrected. It didn't make an uppercase R in Surface and an uppercase A in Surface. It made it look correct. This is because the ink recognition built into Windows it's based on recognizing words. So that's why I'm using the English recognizer. So it recognizes words, and then it does a really much better job than just recognizing individual characters. And so if I am working with this as a tablet, then this starts to become a really useful way of being able to input information. But of course, I can always pop up a little keyboard here and type up a keyboard and just type in here. So what I want to talk about now is, after I've shown you some of these demonstrations, I want to sort of show you where we're looking for the future. And this is a place where Illustrator, for example, we're working with the folks at Adobe and Illustrator to make it even better. So one of the things we're working with them on is the ability to do what's called Simultaneous Pen and Touch. So if I am right now drawing with a pen, I can actually put my palm on the screen, and it won't be picked up. And this is called palm rejection. And this is a feature that's been in Windows for years. When we realized that people wanted to have a natural pose when they did drawing, they wanted to rest their hand on the screen. And what we are doing now, and this is something that is a little bit contrary to that, but actually starts to get really a lot more interesting, is we're now supporting simultaneous pen and touch. So the first thing is we can detect the geometry of the touches that are going on the screen. We can know if it really is a palm or if it is a finger. And based upon that information, we can say, well, we can one of the new features that we're going to be adding into the anniversary update for Windows 10 that's going to be coming out this summer is the ability to actually have a virtual ruler coming on the screen and using two fingers to position that ruler, and while simultaneously using a pen to draw on the edge of that ruler. And so things that Adobe is looking at are implementing things like French curves and be able to be much more expressive with the ways that you can do two-handed drawing, where you have one hand with a pen and another hand is manipulating the page. So, for example, when I draw, I have a particular orientation of my arm which I can draw the best straight lines. And for me, it's a line that goes from the upper left to the lower right. I can draw very straight lines in upper left to lower right. And typically when I'm drawing on paper, when I want to draw a straight line in another orientation, I change the paper. I reorient the paper. So you can imagine that if I took my two fingers and I oriented the paper and I wanted to draw a square, I would move the paper instead of moving my hand and always draw in the same way. That way I can draw the straightest lines possible. And so those are the kind of things that start to get enabled with simultaneous pen and touch. The other place that we're having a lot of investment, you can see this if I open up this application that I was telling you about, Plumbago, which is this drawing application that's free in the store. That this uses a different type of ink, and if we think about what we do here, and I'll just show you a difference, and I'll show you what we have in Illustrator, and you may have noticed this, but the difference and where we're going, we're helping the Illustrator team make their ink even better. So if we look at what a drawing might look like, now I'm going to just pick out a pen, make it a thick pen, and as I draw, it's a little bit delayed right now because of the Skype, that you notice that the lines are very smooth along the edges. Now, that's technology called direct ink, and it's a technology that's new for Windows 10. And what it means is that while the ink is coming out of the pen, it's called wet ink, and that wet ink is being rendered and being drawn directly by the operating system and not by the application that's hosting it. And what that means is that if I go back to Illustrator and you see me while I'm drawing this is not today using this wet ink. And what it means is that the edges along this drawing, so we'll look at the edges along this, they look really jagged. They're actually kind of ugly. And then when I left my pen, that it goes into their dry ink, which is now really smooth and beautiful. So that's the kind of functionality that we're going to be helping Adobe add to their next version of Illustrator, so that you do have, when you're drawing, a really expressive, beautiful, and smooth wet ink. And also we're doing interesting things with this that, for example, we can predict where your drawing is going and where your pen is going to be able to draw the geometry so that it keeps up with the tip of the pen, which is really important. And so we're doing a lot of work to keep the latency and the drawing latency of drawing a pen so that it feels like a real pen. So as you go to explain Surface and Adobe Creative Cloud to your customers and to your partners, this is the key. Keep them focused on drawing and keep them focused on being creative with a pen, and they'll realize that the best pen experience is really on a Surface today, and that you can take that experience anywhere you go. So this is the end of my formal part of my presentation and talk. I'd like to open this up to questions, and feel free to type them in or put them into the or just unmute your audio, and I can answer any questions that you might have.
Michael, it's Marissa. Thank you for taking us through those demos. Amazing. I'm sitting here and I'm super impressed every time I see a demo like that. It just impresses me more and more. And I think it really tells the story of Surface and Pen so beautifully. And I think that's what our partners can go out and speak to their customers too. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And thank you for sharing your sketches. They're amazing. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Next time you come to Australia, you need to spend some more time so you can, up in the top end, so you can do some more beautiful drawings. And next time you come, you need to show us those too.
Well, I need to go to all the other cities in Australia. That's my next challenge. So I need to find a reason to go to Melbourne, Canberra, and everywhere. So
absolutely, next time. So we don't have any questions in the IM window, so I think we'll leave it at that. And just again, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us this morning, and enjoy the next couple of days in Sydney.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.